Hey, everybody, happy Tuesday, and welcome to this special segment of looking at the markets into February. We just had some clean monthly charts finish on Friday, and this recording was done on Monday the 1st, and it's going to be live on February the 2nd. So these charts will be very relevant still, but this is going to be a day delayed. So just a heads up there. Rachel, thank you for joining us. You're the founder of VSOptions, a trading community and Discord. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into trading and what you really focus on in your room?
Yeah, for sure. And thank you so much for having me on here. And also, congrats on having a baby boy soon. I'm so
Thank
excited for
you.
you. Yeah,
Thanks.
boys are the best. So basically, I got into trading when I met my husband about 10 years ago, I would say. He actually had a mentor at his church who got him into options, and he was a veteran. And I just remember going to his house and he had a bunch of screens set up, and I was just so fascinated by it. It was in his bedroom. And I started observing the intraday movement and began to realize through options how much you can make with such little risk. And I didn't have a degree at the time, but I was just about to go to school, so and wanted to research it further. So I ended up applying to the business school and got a degree in finance. That's a whole different story. They didn't really teach me any trading strategies there, but I did take a few investment courses and got to play around with the Bloomberg terminal. That was pretty cool. But a bulk of my learning came from just Google technical analysis books, YouTube, and Twitter. Pretty much made like a stock Twits account like a long time ago just to see what
Mhm.
was trending. And I would watch that every day, just researching charts and other people's accounts. And I wanted to be able to master those setups on my own. So pretty much just spent weekends researching chart patterns, candlesticks, just to kind of discover my own uh, technical analysis and like way of trading. Um, so yeah, when it comes to my room, what I like to focus on are trend lines, wedge breakouts, bull flags, all-time high breakouts, earnings reaction follow through, and I also apply that analysis into the intraday, like on the 5 minute, 15-minute, 30-minute charts as well, just to do day trades,
Mhm.
especially on SPX. So I focus a lot on those levels in the room. And for my members, I give SPX levels all day. For like if we were to drop 40 points, I'm going to give them where a big support is, where we could consolidate. And then my favorite part is giving them the bounce zone as well. Um, so I do like to focus on that for relative strength, like especially when we're down, we can see a bunch of names that are showing relative strength compared to SPX. So I'll
Mhm.
go in sometimes and buy names like say Netflix is holding when SPX is lower. Sometimes I'll buy that. Um, and that goes with my trading strategy. Feel like sometimes when you have a great setup, it runs pretty rapidly on the breakout. So I like to use weeklies or a week out. And I understand that that's pretty risky. So I kind of like to go into weekly trades kind of pre-managed where I like to buy an amount I'm willing to lose. But
Mhm.
in the room, we also do common stock. That's also my favorite. I'll buy those same breakouts with common stock. I scale pretty quickly on that because I play with size and then raise my stops and end up holding a runner position so I can diversify my portfolio.
Love it. Love it. And by the way, I didn't mention I love the hat, the Trend Spider
Oh,
hat.
thanks. Yeah, I love this so much. And I got the mask and I can't wait to rock all that soon.
Yeah, I love it. Well, okay, so as far as the charts go, as I mentioned, we did this on February 1st. We're releasing it on February 2nd. So you really focus on like a Sunday weekend list, and I think there was 5 stocks that you wanted to go over today. What I'm going to do is after you're done, kind of just pull up the monthly chart since we are going into a new month and just seeing what everything looks like. Maybe look at some seasonality and all that. So, as far as the stocks you're looking at today, is it a mix of kind of larger names, or what are we looking at today?
Yeah, I would say these are the large momentum names. Just one that I don't normally trade that I put on there is like more of a trending name that I've seen on Wall Street bets. So I thought I would kind of put that one out there since it's also set up technically.
Love it. All right, well, let's jump into it. We'll look at the weekly side of things, then I'll take over and we'll look at the monthly side of things. But Rachel's got a really cool style, so I'm looking forward to doing this. And let's jump right in. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're using on the chart? So we've got the purple line there, we've got the light blue, and then looking like the MACD. Can you just explain a little bit about, the reason you use those, and then kind of we'll jump right into the setup?
Yeah, I've actually noticed that the 10-day and 50, or sorry, 10 SMA and 50 SMA have worked really well for me as support and resistance levels. And then I also like to use the MACD to help give me some more confirmation on trend changes, since I like using trend lines for a lot of
Hmm.
my entries. So for Microsoft, last week it had strong earnings, but it didn't close very strong last week, probably because the whole GameStop squeeze may have caused like some funds to sell general equities, maybe to alleviate some risk. So it could be the reason why it didn't close strong last week. But I still love this wedge breakout on the daily, and how valid this trend line is. As you can see here, it back tested this same trend line as a support, just to rip back to highs this week. So I'm thinking that if it can get through this all-time high of 242.64, then I have 250 as a target. I'm actually in shares right now at the 216 level. I've already scaled 3/4 of it, so I'm holding 1/4 for a possible break of highs, and I'll probably use this trend line as a stop.
Hmm.
And if I go into the daily here, just to like where I got my target, as you can see, I like to use these trend lines here for the breakout. It broke above the 50 and 10-day here with MACD crossover, and you can see how much this broke through there. So you can take that for a scalp as well. And I like
Hmm.
to use these fibs on here. I don't know if you guys do it this way, but the swing low to swing high to this retracement, I have 250 as a possible target here as well. So
Nice,
that's
using
what
the
I'll be
3 point fib. I like
watching.
it.
Yeah, that's how I do it. I mean, I'll do it in different parts of the charts, maybe like the monthly or weekly, but if I'm using the daily, I like to use this recent trend change here as my swing low. But yeah, my first target's 250, and I'll be watching that for this month if it can break through. And depending on how you trade, like I said, you can use this arrow as an entry, or you could even use this support as a possible backtest again. So I have this one on watch, but like I said, I'm in common already. I mean, you could always take calls for a scalp, but I'm going to just hold on to that for now.
Cool, makes sense. Well, Microsoft breaking out of these longer term levels, SLV is another one that's looking ready to potentially break out. We did have the Wall Street bets pump Monday, and as far as the chart goes on the weekly, what do you think in there, Rachel? And is there possibly continuation? Do we back test to retest that resistance? It does look like it's a pretty similar setup as far as the symmetrical triangle looking for now. But that can change quick.
Yeah, for sure. That's why I actually took a look at this one because of the retail support. So I'm thinking that if we can get follow through beyond the news, it would be very strong, given that these technicals are aligning. And like I said, I do like using these 3 point trend lines, and it did break out today. It didn't close the best, but it's still above this trend line. So I'm going to keep this upper trend line. As a support now. So if we can hold above that, then I think it's still a safe play. It has MACD crossover on the weekly as well as the daily. But I think it's going to need the follow through where this arrow is above today's high for it to keep going. If I'm looking for a target on this one, I'm going to go back to historical prices instead of using fib lines. So I'm kind of looking over here where it had this consolidation. I'm looking at the high where it's about like the 33 to 34 area. And actually, if I
Hmm.
do use fibs over here, it does give me that, like, I think it's like 33.4 level anyway. So it's right in between. Um, so I am watching that as a target if it can hold. But like I said, it does need this area. And if I'm taking it over to the daily, if you want to use a support for this, if you're currently long, I would use today's low, which is 26. And then there's a gap fill here at the 25 area. So I think we're in the safe zone if it can hold there for short term.
I think you made a good point. A lot of people use fibs and, let's say, fib extensions when you still have price memory. So, for example, you mentioned I'm not going to use the fib because there's previous pivots there that were relevant before. So, kind of like what you did on Microsoft, since we're hitting these new highs, fibs were really important as just a level of relevancy, since so many people will look at these extensions. But with this one, we do still have quite a bit of room to move up compared to what we hit back in 2012, 2013. Now, as far as silver goes, is this mostly a technical trade? Do you look at the fundamental side as far as like stimulus, money supply growing, that type of thing, or is it mostly technical and then it just is convenient to have that fundamental thesis kind of supporting the chart too?
I do like to have the fundamental thesis in the background, but right now I like to just look at price. I mean, with the whole Wall Street bet thing, at least this is a metal, like it's an asset. I don't think you're going to wake up in the morning and like GameStop, it's going to be down 200
Mhm.
points. So I think it's a little safer bet to have. But like I said, since I do mostly focus on the technical aspect, I would get stopped out if it broke a certain support. And I would just re enter again if the fundamentals were there.
Hey, makes sense. I was kind of shocked that the Wall Street bet crew did take on silver just
I
because it is
know.
a little more liquid than your GameStops or your other things. Even if there's short interest, that's a little bit of a different play. So we'll see how it plays out. Who knows? We did have a nice gap up on Monday, and the chart on the weekly does show a nice breakout. So who knows? Maybe these Wall Street bet guys are using TrendSpider to check out these breakout levels. Now we looked at Microsoft, we looked at SLV. Let's look at one that has really had some trouble, kind of like Microsoft, NVIDIA. NVIDIA is one that really has been stuck for a long time, months and months, several months, and it's finally looking a little. It's looking a little coily here. What are you thinking on Nvidia on the weekly side, and then what are other indicators that you use showing?
Yeah, so for NVIDIA, like you were saying, that's exactly what my thoughts were on this. This has been doing nothing for so long. But I've had this trend line actually drawn here since this low, and I seeing how it's respecting it. Even today, I posted this yesterday without this day here, and you can see that it keeps respecting this lower trend line. So I'm thinking you can either play within the wedge, which is a little bit riskier to do, but once it does break out, since it hasn't done anything for so long, if it can finally break out with volume, I could see a sizable move happening, which could be a nice swing trade. So I would be watching this upper trend line here for a break. But like I said, if you wanted to take it for a possible scalp opportunity as well, I'm watching this 533 level, which are the high of these two candles and the 10 SMA right now. And if you were to draw a trend line here, because this is what I would like to do, it looks like it would align at this level as well, and it could see a breakout. And
Mhm.
I would watch for a gap fill possibly here at this uh, is it 530? Yeah, 537. And then I'm watching this 540, sorry, 546 level here, which has been the high of these candles. Um, and then 560 I would use as well as a resistance. So with my candles, is this 546? Yeah, I like to use like an average of these high and lows just to kind of get that level. So that would be like a target of mine if it were to break out, like say this week. But yeah, it's done nothing for so long that I probably would wait for this upper trend line to break. Um, so
I
I'm
think
just
it's
watching it for now.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned if you go back to the daily,
Yeah.
and this is what really I think creates pretty intense technical breakouts sometimes because there's so many different participants that are looking at this, right? You've got the moving average participants who are seeing that 10-day as resistance, and what is that? Is that the 50 you said?
Yeah, the purple
The
one's the
50.
50.
And then you've got the trend line participants who are looking at that trend line, which is right in confluence with those MAs. So it's really interesting that sometimes these breakouts really occur because there's so many different players that are seeing a breakout, whether that's a moving average trend line, that it actually becomes kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so I thought that was interesting that you brought that up. That is kind of right in line with that trend line resistance as well.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, I probably wouldn't go long like common stock or anything until it broke that wedge. But for a day trade, I think if it breaks this 533 level where it keeps stopping up here, which is also aligned with this 10-day, could probably see that gap fill and maybe go to 546. So, um, like you said, other people are watching it as well. So it'll be interesting to see if it can break through that this week.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it will be interesting to see what happens the rest of the week. I do think there were quite a few people that were holding cash into last week, and anytime everybody thinks the same thing that their market's going to go down, it's just it's kind of like a rule that it can't, because it's just too many people are watching one thing. As much as that can create confluence of breakouts, it can also create, an opposite effect too. So we'll see what happens. And, great analysis there. As far as the next one, CRM. CRM is one that, full disclosure, I do have a position in, just options, not a big one or anything, but it's been one that has really been stuck now for a while, and it looks like it's finally starting to catch a little bit of a bid. And is that the 10-week SMA that kind of had a little back test on today, at least on the weekly side?
Yeah, it did. And I have a position in CRM as well. I'm in shares at 222, I believe. So I am looking to, you could play this wedge probably, but I am watching this support trend line to hold. It's actually been holding really well even when the market was down last week. I thought that it was showing relative strength because it
Hmm.
didn't break this trend line. Um, so, like I said, you could play this intraday wedge, like you know how I like playing with the what trend lines as well. So you could actually put this here and see that it held this trend line and kind of buy on this breakout, which is pretty much what I was doing when I bought Common, and I've had no reason to stop out right now, so I'm holding on to it.
Hmm.
Um, it's pretty similar to Nvidia. It's another wedge, so it just hasn't broken out yet. Um, but I'm watching 230 resistance, which is this high, as the next breakout. And on the daily, I think you saw when I had it over here, I bought it on this falling wedge breakout. Um, and it's just been consolidating between these two levels, or the two moving averages that I love to use so much, the 10 SMA and the 50 SMA. So as you can see, they've been working pretty well as a consolidation area.
That
So
is
I'm
That is that is like the first time I've ever seen a moving average create like a flag like that. That is interesting, where
right,
you've got literally like this, or this, sorry, not flag, this kind of pennant formation here. So it's about as
hmm
tight as it can get. And I'll touch on the raindrop too when I take over. But it was interesting to see there's quite a bit of volume at the top of the range on today's candle, which would kind of show there was some conviction by buyers above that 50 SMA. But all in all, a great chart. I mean, yeah, I love how you keep it simple. I think a lot of people think that when you're doing technical analysis, you have to have so many things on the chart, but so cliche to say this, but it's kind of like analysis paralysis. You
yeah,
maybe five things are working, but if you have 15 things on your chart and there's 10 other things that aren't working, you're never going to be able to find something that actually is in full confluence. And that's something that can actually hurt you rather than help you by having too many things on. So I love the fact that you keep it simple, really look at the same pattern over and over, same moving averages that really kind of tell a story. And yeah, CRM's definitely one, especially with the gap above too. And I'll touch on that on
yeah.
my side of the story. But yeah, that gap is around, I think, 238, 239, and generally that's a target for traders above. And there's not a lot of liquidity once you get into those gaps. So
Yeah,
that will be an interesting one.
yeah, for sure. And that's why I do like to use these two because I've seen they help me very well. I also like to use the 200 day, but I haven't really needed it lately just because we've been in such a massive uptrend that not a lot of names are near the 200 day. Um, but yeah, that's actually my target. Like you said, this gap fill. Um, you said the 238 area. I like to use the close. So I was just looking at 241 for now, but also
Mhm.
like this bullish MACD has been holding. So I'm watching this high right here as the next breakout. So you could probably scalp some calls if it breaks over that 230.3, if it's tomorrow or sometime this week.
Nice. Well, we have one more. We have Twitter. Twitter is one that has been an interesting one because it kind of turns some people off from their political stuff. And a lot of people just ignored the charts, but really, this thing was setting up a couple weeks ago and just has absolutely continued quite well. Twitter, is this something that you have as a stock on your watch list often? That's another question I was going to ask you. Do you kind of trade the same thing over and over? Or do you really just trade whatever's in play and what's showing a good setup?
I usually just like to play what's showing a good setup. I have a pretty like extensive watch list that I have on my phone actually that I try to look at every morning and every weekend just to see which names are setting up. because I don't want to like force something just because I like it so much. I'll kind of move on to the next one. And I kind of noticed um, that Twitter held this trend line or within this channel, even with all that negative news flow from the whole Trump censorship news. And it seemed like it ultimately got bought back up. So I was watching this as it was showing relative strength from that. And I actually had this posted on one of my weekly charts 2 weeks ago because I was telling my members that if it broke up above this high, I could possibly see some follow through just because it did hold on to this big support here. So I'm actually still watching this for a break of 53. If it can break above last week's high, I'm watching for a possible test of this like 56 area and then maybe the upper channel ahead of earnings because they do report on February 9th. So if tech earnings are good this week, this could also be one to run into the number, I would say. So the daily, let's see, I was going to go to the daily. Kind of interesting here, but it's a little bit
Wow.
choppy, but I do like the higher low that it's forming if you look at it overall, and it does have this bullish MACD crossover as well. Um, if you were using it, if you wanted to use a tight stop on this, I would use this like 50-day area because it would be aligned with breaking the trend line as well.
Do you look
Um,
for the crosses as any type of confirmation, like the 10 crossing the 50 or the price is above the 50 or the 10, or is it more or less just an area where price can potentially test those areas as support or resistance?
I look at both, but usually just using them as a support and resistance level. Just because a lot of times I'm doing day trading, so I'm just using it as a quick like level of support. But I do love using the MACD as a crossover as a confirmation
Mhm.
for a trend change, and I actually use this intraday and as well as the trend lines. So like even on the 5 minute chart.
Okay, makes sense. Well, these were some great charts. You post them all the time on Twitter, so a lot of people are able to see this stuff for free without even being in your community. And then you put even more value within the Discord. I've been able to come in and post a few charts in there lately, and it's a really tight knit community, and everyone's just kind of helping everybody out. You're throwing levels out there like crazy. I think that's awesome. That you can even get in trading at all with all the levels that you do. So I think it's pretty sweet that you can manage all that together. So that is a look at the weekly, the daily. Since we're premiering this on Tuesday tomorrow, it'll be interesting to see how some of these daily candles actually do play out into Tuesday and Wednesday. But all in all, I mean, Twitter does have quite the inside day, and it's really interesting to see the entire body of Monday's candle is in Friday's wick, which
Yeah,
you
that
don't
is
always see.
interesting.
So let's jump over to my charts. It's going to be hard to keep them this clean and simple, but I'm really going to look at some of the volume side of things with the anchored volume by price and the seasonality. And let's jump right into it.
Great. I'm excited to see your take on all of these.
Alrighty, so Rachel went over the weekly charts. I'm gonna go over some of the monthly charts, just since we are kind of in February now. As I mentioned, we did this recording on the 1st. We're gonna premiere it on the 2nd. So a lot of these charts are very fresh and new, and there's quite a few charts that haven't really had a lot of price action. I mean, literally one day. And for example, on Microsoft, we're already breaking out. And Rachel, it's so interesting that you look at and I like to look at diagonal trend lines probably more than horizontal. The reason why I did highlight this horizontal level is just to show that we've literally been in the 7-month range and have not gone anywhere. So it kind of goes back to that confluence we were talking about. You've got your diagonal traders who are looking at this diagonal breakout, but then you've got the horizontal level traders who are seeing this open above this horizontal level around 230, 235. So it is interesting to see that confluence. Is there ever a time that you do use horizontal lines, or do you generally just stick to the diagonal and kind of focus on the patterns like the wedges and that type of thing?
I will focus on diagonal as well. I mean, sorry, these horizontal lines as well. Normally, though, when it's an all-time high breakout, which you're kind of seeing here, but I love how you have that buffer with the different wicks as well. So I like this perspective of it because it is breaking out. So like I said, usually I'll use the horizontal if it's breaking through an all-time high, but most of the time it's the diagonal.
Yeah, and kind of back to what you showed on Microsoft, we are kind of in price discovery mode. I mean, if we
Mhm.
zoom back, we've never been at these levels before. So we can't go and pick up a pivot to say, hey, this is the next level to watch.
Yeah.
So, this is where, you know, take this, actually, sorry, take this right here and honestly just put it right here, and it's going to be a little off, but I mean the 1.618 is right around 253, 254. This is where I would probably just put an alert right here. If you want to put sensitivity, great. If not, the sensitivity really just helps so you don't have to be right on the money here. It's more or less a zone that you're being alerted at, because there are times where the price action is going to miss these levels by a couple cents. And then you look at the chart and, it's down 5% because everybody saw the same thing.
Mhm.
Probably some people got out a little early, it creates a waterfall, and then you miss the trade. So these are nice to catch some of that the margin of error around these zones, especially the 1.618 extension. A lot of people are looking at that. So we'll have to see what happens going into the coming months. But I mean, these candles have quite the range. I mean, we could easily test this 1.618 this month, especially if you've got all this cash that's coming into play. That's pretty much been on the sidelines over the last week as everybody is trying to figure out what happened with this GameStop AMC thing. So, the fibs are, as I mentioned, a little off here, but the reason is because I'm creating these zones rather than just one precise area. And so these solid and then dashed lines are essentially the same thing as the sensitivity that I just went over. It's creating a zone rather than just one precise level to watch. And in January, we did from earnings break through this a little bit, but we then closed literally right at these two previous highs from August and September, that were wicks essentially. So it's always interesting to see wicks becoming a potential area of interest above. And then once we break out of that, that's kind of when things are back on. Another thing I wanted to point out here is this March capitulation candle. If you guys have been watching some of the other analyses that I've been doing, this capitulation point is really the place that I like to anchor from, because this is when the market reset. This is when everybody went to cash and everybody pretty much started a new position, or at least a lot of people did. And so we want to see, since this big capitulation, where a majority of the shares holding. And we don't have a lot of candles here. This is why I mention a lot of times in these videos that I like to have probably more than 20 candles, because you can see it gets a little clunky here just because there's not a lot of price data yet. However, we can see that there's quite a bit of volume around this point of control like 215, but also this just shelf in general really created a nice base for price to move up in December and January. So we do have the breakout. Obviously, it's literally 1 month into February. So this monthly candle is 1 day old. There's still a lot of time for this to form. So just because we are looking good now, there's still a lot of time left. But I personally like to see gap ups into previous wicks. It just shows that there's definitely strength there. So we'll have to see what happens. The one other thing I was going to mention on the seasonality side, February has a slight downtick in the win rate here over the last 10 years. So what I did was, I'm just looking back over the last 10 years since 2010. Why am I doing 10 years? Well, 2010 is pretty much that first year that we got a full bull market price action and really bottom. So I want to look at, since this new trend started pretty much end of 2009 and into 2010, how has the market performed? If I went back to 2000, I would be taking in a lot of price action. We're taking into account the financial crisis. We're taking into account the latter parts of the dot-com bubble and 2011 crash. So by only looking at 2010, we're really looking at the seasonality within this current trend that we've been in now for like 10 years. So
Yeah, I like that.
yeah, we'll see what happens. March and April definitely have an uptick in win rates before May and June. 55 and 45%. Sell in May, go away. That's a saying, but who knows? Maybe the seasonality at least is telling us that is a thing for Microsoft into the early months of summer. Going into SLV. So Rachel mentioned SLV is definitely on the Wall Street bet side of things, but it's interesting to see that we did have that pump really from just the media attention. However, we did have, as Rachel pointed out, a breakout through the wedge, but also off of this volume shelf. So same thing. I'm anchoring the volume by price from this March capitulation point. This is when the market reset. And once again, we've got this shelf kind of creating a launch pad for price. Because remember, at this point, let's say from 2250 all the way up to 2350, this is where everybody's holding at break even. So as soon as people stop selling and everybody just holds because they're at break even, this creates that shift in the supply and demand curve, and that's how you get the next move. We'll see if this continues up. This was quite a gap up for silver, for any stock, but especially for silver. I mean, we're up at one point over 10% on Monday, the 1st. And we'll have to see if this continues. But the main thing that I would point out here is this pivot that we did technically break through this previous high around 2740. So, we'll have to see what happens. But as Rachel mentioned, we do have that potential back test of the symmetrical triangle resistance, which could potentially act as support. With February from the last 10 years, we have a 58% win rate as well. So that's interesting. Microsoft and SLV both had that. Anything I'm missing here on the monthly side of things that you want to add, Rachel?
No, I love it. I love the volume shelf, how it acted, or how it is perfect right there with the bottom wick. So that's great. And
Yeah.
it looks like if it were to back test, it would probably be around that same top of that volume shelf. Sorry, I'm pointing over here. You can't see me.
You're fine. One thing that's interesting that I've seen a lot too is sometimes price will literally just stair step up these shelves.
Yeah.
That happened in, what was it, Apple, I think, or no, maybe it was Space SPCE. But if we did pull back, it's very easy for price to come back to these areas, because remember, everybody who bought at 23, even $24 is now up over 10%. So when the price drops back down to these levels that everybody's break even, supply dries up, and you just kind of had this stair step action. So a lot of people are thinking this is going to go parabolic soon. I mean, it definitely is showing a nice curve here to the upside, and we'll have to see what happens. But appreciate that input, Rachel. And hey, who knows? Maybe we'll see some more some volume by price on the charts with the symmetrical triangles now.
Yeah.
NVDA, another one that looks pretty similar to Microsoft, except it just has not broken out yet. One thing that I want to mention here, and this is going to be pretty much the same thing as always, we're using this capitulation candle from March. However, we have not moved off this shelf yet. So remember, silver's already moved off its shelf. Microsoft already moved off its shelf. NVIDIA is still right on this shelf. And on top of that, we do have the monthly seasonality since 2010 showing quite a spike in the win rate here. So this is actually the second best win rate as far as months go over the last 10 years. So we have February at a 75% win rate. Remember, a win rate simply just means over the last 10 years, 75% of the time, February has closed green versus January's close. So it's not telling us that there's a 75% chance. It's telling us that historically, 75% of the time, February has closed green versus January. So Rachel kind of showed this symmetrical triangle type of pattern forming. We are pretty much in the same type of realm as Microsoft. So since September, we have gone nowhere. We've almost actually traded within the September's range. I think we have for the last 5 months. So it's pretty much, this is like the 5th inside month from September. So that's kind of interesting to see that, we're starting to potentially get a little bit of a bid coming in. But at the same time, there's so many people holding at break even here. all we really need is people to finally just kind of the final people to capitulate here. Any type of spike in demand is going to move this. I personally thought AMD was going to kind of create that spark since they are both semiconductors, but that is not what happened. However, we are starting to see a little bit of a little bit of a peekaboo candle here, but as I mentioned, we're one day into February. This candle can look literally completely different by the end of this month. But all in all, volume shelf, that's kind of the recurring theme here across all these. Most of them are either on a shelf or breaking out of one. And remember, the volume by price is simply just measuring volume as a function of price instead of measuring it as a function of time, meaning that you're looking at each month and saying, okay, there was X amount of volume shares traded in May. We're seeing, all right, there's this many shares traded at this price level. So another shelf, we saw from Rachel that we do have kind of that triangle forming, symmetrical triangle forming. And Rachel, what do you think? You think what are the chances? We've got the seasonality on our side. We've got the volume shelf. Do you think that this is going to be kind of a technical thing, or do you think it's going to be a mix of just people are looking for the next move and they know that NVIDIA and some of these others are just lagging your Microsofts that are breaking out and that type of thing?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a mixture of both. And it's kind of cool to see. I didn't realize the seasonality was at 75%. So I think it's all about if it can just get through that wedge. Or what's the top of that previous month? Is that
Right around 590,
560? Oh, the
right?
previous one?
Oh, previous month here. Yep, right around
Yeah,
560.
560. Yeah, because I think I had that previously as a possible entry. So I think if it can break above there, then like it gets out of that volume shelf as well. So that's interesting to look at.
Yeah, kind of blue skies ahead. And the
Hmm.
thing about this is there's not a lot of people holding above. So, you know, when you don't have a lot of shares holding above, let's say that there was a volume node up here, right? Maybe there's a volume gap and then there's a volume node right here. You know, if the price got back, let's put it down here. If there's a big volume node here, let's say that price action happened a little differently than it is, and there's just a lot of people holding here. Remember, if the price is at 529, and then all of these people bought in at 615, 620, as the price gets back up to where all these shares are holding, there's going to be some break even supply selling, meaning that all these people that just dealt with an X% drawdown are back to break even, and they're kind of thrown in the towel. They're like, well, at least I got my money back. I'm going to move elsewhere and buy something else. And generally, a lot of the time, that's when a lot of people are buying. And sometimes the price doesn't really consolidate at these areas long, just because it's really a breakout zone. So the reason why I brought that up is because there are not a lot of shares holding up here. This would be kind of blue skies ahead. And this is where I'd probably even go to the weekly for the fib level. But I mean, even if you did the fib level of simply like just this candle here, the 1.618 would be right around 665, which is quite a move, considering we're at 529 right now. So seasonality's there, volume shelf is there. The fact that this hasn't moved in 5 months is there. And this could be one to finally watch into the month of February, assuming nothing crazy happens and some of this crazy volatility is over.
Yeah,
CRM
for
is the
sure.
next one. Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
Oh
Rachel.
no, I was gonna say also with NVIDIA, depending on what Biden decides to do with the tariffs, this could be one to move to since all those semis are gonna be waiting for that.
Not
I
to,
haven't really looked into it much, but we'll see what he says. It's obviously on his desk.
yeah, no, and a lot of the time it's interesting how these technicals align with the fundamental and the news story. So I think that's a
Mhm.
great point. I didn't even think about that. So on top of the seasonality, the technicals, you do have that potential spark from more of a news event as well. So
Mhm.
great point, Rachel. CRM is one that I guess we're both in. This is, I think, the only one that we're going over that I have a position in. And I'll kind of explain the reason I'm in the position I'm in. So we've got this bull flag here.
I
So
love
we've got
that.
this. we got the, and kind of back to the, these dashed lines. Essentially what I'm doing here is I'm connecting these two wicks. So I've got these two wicks here, creating the solid line, which is kind of our solid support. But then I'm kind of creating this dashed line, which is just a parallel line connecting these bodies in this other wick here from January. So it just creates a zone rather than just one area. And really all I'm doing is I'm just copy and pasting. So I'm on a Mac. So if I hold Command and just drag, I can create as many parallel lines as I want. So for those that are looking to create parallel lines of something you've already drawn, at least for Mac, I think it's just the Windows key. If you're on a PC, you just hold that down, click and drag, and you can create these new ones. And so for me, let's just delete this. All I'm doing is I'm holding the Command key down, I'm dragging it, double clicking it, changing the line to dashed, and making the stroke a little smaller. And we've got that type of that view. So definitely allows us to have a little bit of margin of error around these areas. But the main thing here, and this is kind of back to what we mentioned with Microsoft, we've got this capitulation in March, but with the monthly candle, sometimes the system just has a little bit of a hard time capturing these nodes because there's not a ton of candles. So if we went to the weekly chart and we anchored the volume by price from this March low, you'll see that these candles are a lot more fluid. And so we'll go to the weekly chart just for a second here, because what I wanted to point out here is we have this massive volume shelf here on the weekly side of things, but we have this volume gap above, which is a little bit of a function of the price gap. But remember, there's been a lot of price memory within this area that's not part of the price gap. So when we moved up, we traded within this area. So it's not just the price gap that's creating this volume gap. There's just not a lot of liquidity above until we get to like 246. That's the next volume node here, right here. So if I make this red, that's where a lot of people are holding. So as we talked about before, the price moves up. There's not a lot of holders here. So there's not going to be a lot of people selling because they're not break even selling. But once the price gets through this volume gap and up to this next node, that's where some of these people who have been holding in a drawdown for quite a while are likely going to throw in the towel, or at least maybe cut their position now that they're back to break even. So I like to call these areas above break even supply because these people are back to break even. Maybe they're going to take at least some off the table and move on, simply maybe just due to opportunity cost. But kind of that monthly flag is what I'm definitely looking at. And then if we do anchor it from here, just notice that it is a little more fluid when you anchor the volume by price from the weekly instead of the monthly. February, 75% win rate. What was the last? Wasn't NVIDIA 75% too? We've had 258% and 275%. That never happened.
Interesting.
Yeah, so we've got a slight uptick in seasonality here as well.
I love that flag. I love the chart.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy because the Slack news was that sell the news event, it seemed, when they acquired Slack. But it does seem like Kathy Woods, I think, has been adding, and it's crazy how much of a self-fulfilling prophecy that creates. So it was interesting to see her loading up in the 215s, 216s area, or not big positions, but definitely I think adding. So we do have kind of these bigger investors starting to take an eye at this at these lower prices. We've got the flag. My guess would be that we potentially test this upper area, maybe 240 to 249 this month. Who knows? This could even be a breakout month. There's still a lot of month left.
Yeah, I love that.
Twitter. This one is one that I was in, and then kind of that opportunity cost calls type thing happened. I kind of capitulated on that. I think around 47.30, and then something else, and I started playing Fubo, MGNI, and a couple other ones, which ended up paying off. So this is one, if we do break these let's say highs that have really been here since 2014, and this is what I mean by price memory, right? Like when we don't have any previous areas to look at, we use fibs, but we already have these areas in 2014 that were levels that were rejected pretty hard by price. So we want to extend this over and see that we're literally right at that same area. And this is really going to create possibly a little bit of a frenzy as all these people, especially people who are horizontal level traders, see this breakout from this multi-year high. Pretty much from 2014, we are just testing those highs again. That will be interesting. This is not what I would call any type of textbook cup and handle, but you do have that cup kind of look, and then you kind of have this handle type of deal as well. So it would be interesting to see if this starts to resolve to the upside after this consolidation for literally like 2.5 years. Do you look at cup and handles much, Rachel? Or are you more focused on kind of the diagonal resistance and support? I know I've asked you this question like in 3 different ways, but
No,
um,
yeah, I do. And a lot of times with the handle, like since it will oftentimes look like a flag, then I'll already, have that on my radar. So I
mhm.
think it was Google that had one recently that I really liked. It might have been a while ago, but I do um, look at cup and handles as well. It's interesting to see that the monthly kind of resembles the daily chart as well. Once you drew those, I don't know. I've never used that squiggle line before, but I like it.
The what do we call
Which
this?
one's that
The
called? Sorry, I'm just like
polyline.
squiggly line.
I
Okay.
I forgot what it was called there for a second. Yeah, the polyline. And for those that do want to use the polyline on TrendSpider, the reason why it's curved like this is because I have the smooth box checked. So see here, when I click unsmooth, they actually become linear. So if you did want to have that smoothing effect, just make sure you click smooth. And one little tip here. When I first started using this, I'm drawing this and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Okay, I'm done drawing it. And then I'm like, how do I get rid of this squiggle thing? If you are done drawing your smooth line or just this polyline in general, just click enter and it will stop the drawing. So you don't have this continuous line that's being drawn. That pretty much happened to me the first day I was using this. But all in all, I think the big thing here is this previous level around 56. I mean, this was previous highs over the last couple months, but it's also previous highs from 6 years ago, 7 years ago that we're still trying to resolve through. So if we did start to break through that area and we did even break the IPO highs, this thing could even test if we got through the 75 zone. This is where you'd start throwing out the extensions simply because there is no previous price there. We're kind of hitting new highs. So the 1.618 is around 112. The 2.618 is around 172. This was one of my favorite stocks until it kind of took a hit for 2021. But I think if we did break out of this previous area again, it would definitely be worth looking at and seeing what we're kind of gonna go into March. Now, the one thing I would mention is if we did break out, it would be interesting to see. And this is since 2013, because that's when Twitter IPO'd. The seasonality drops significantly into March. So it'd be really hard for me to kind of buy a breakout if I did know we were going into a seasonally weak time of the year. Now, just because it's a 29% win rate, that still means 29% of the time it's been a winner. So just because you see a low win rate on the seasonality doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a red month or a green month. It's just telling us, historically speaking, how has this played out. So, that's something to keep in mind. Just because you see a high win rate doesn't mean it's always going to go up. It just means that, historically speaking, it's been a winner greater than 50% of the time. Bitcoin was a great example of this. Bitcoin, I think, had like a 20 something percent win rate since 2015 for December. And December was an absolutely massive month for Bitcoin. So just because you see those win rates and lower win rates doesn't necessarily mean that should be a make or break. Like anything on the charts or technical analysis, you want to at least use quite a few variables. You probably don't want to have 15 things on your chart because you're going to have too many different decisions to make, but you always don't want to go off just one thing. So I think that's important because, too much is not good, but also too little, you're kind of giving what you are using a lot of weight, which may not be the best move either. So
Yeah, and just to elaborate on that, like something like Tesla, it's hard to kind of look at seasonality with that, with like how parabolic it's been within like the past year, like compared to last year and this year. I feel like Tesla's just insane recently. So, how do
Yeah.
you look at seasonality with something compared to like Roku versus Apple when it comes out with when Apple has like their iPhone numbers and everything?
Yep, it's one of those things that you always have to take that into account, right? I mean,
Hmm.
if you have seasonality that's really low for 1 month, but they've come out with a number that they never had before, maybe those are offsetting each other. So, seasonality is one thing I like to look at as a variable in the equation, but it's definitely not, an end all be all. But if you have a bull flag and you have high seasonality, that's always an interesting combination. But
Yeah.
I know we've had quite a long convo. I know everybody has a little bit of a attention span that once they hit that threshold, it's kind of like, boop, can't focus anymore. So I think we're probably near that point. And Rachel, really appreciate you coming on and telling us a little about your trading journey, your trading group VSOptions. And for those that do want to try out TrendSpider, we do have a coupon code for this event, VS25. So that's 25% off any plan. So that if you wanted to do a monthly plan, that's for 1 month. If you wanted to do a yearly plan, you'd get 25% off that whole year. But any last comments that you want to make, Rachel, before we wrap this up and see what the rest of February has for us?
No, yeah, thank you so much for having me on here, and I really enjoyed like watching your perspective of um, all of the names that I'm looking at, and I really love your charts, and I'm probably going to use some of these new features on some of my charts just to give it another perspective for my members as well. And I want to say I appreciate you being in the chat room sometimes as well because the members love your charts. They think you're a celebrity, so I love
No,
it.
definitely not a celebrity, but hey, it's always awesome to see other perspectives and see what everybody else is looking at. So I'm happy to come in and say hello. And I try to do this with other partners as well. So when time permits is the big thing, right? It's
Mhm.
kind of been a crazy last 8 months for TrendSpider. Just everybody's looking to trade the markets, and it's been a great last year, kind of coming up on the 1 year of COVID, which has been horrible for a lot of people and their jobs. And we're just incredibly lucky at TrendSpider where some of that interest funneled into the markets over the last year because everybody's sitting at home. So we really appreciate all of our partners and yourself for really helping spread the word about TrendSpider. And looking forward to doing one of these again. And everybody have a great evening. Thank you again for joining and checking this out. And remember, VS25, 25% off any plan, 1 month or 1 year. And if you have any questions, just let us know. Rachel, thank you again. And looking forward to doing this again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much.